Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a big show. We are going to cover the back-to-back national champion UConn Huskies, what the fallout is from them winning yet another national championship back-to-back for the first time since Florida did it almost 20 years ago. Are they a blue blood now? We'll get all of that. We'll get into that in just a second in segment 1. In segment 2, we're going to talk a little bit about the Defensive Player of the Year debate between Victor Wembenyama and Rudy Gobert. Talk a little bit about who I think should win, what I think is going to happen, and what this looks like in the NBA in the future. Segment 3, we're going to transition out of basketball, talk a little bit about the MLB. I've made my first power rankings list of the season. It's a little early, so I've categorized them into, I believe, 5 categories. We'll break that all down once we get there in segment 3. And we're going to close our show talking a little bit about a new trend that I've been seeing popped up recently around the world of sports, with cities saying no to funding billionaire stadiums. So we'll talk about the fallout from that, everything that comes with that as well, and what the future of sports looks like, because stadiums and sports very intertwined in these cities. So we'll see exactly what that's going to look like in the future. But before we get into UConn, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. You can control what we talk about in the show. When you leave that tip or donation, it'll pop up. You can leave a message. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. Whatever you want to ask, we'll have a little discussion about it. Once again, that link to leave a tip or donation is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, UConn is your national champion. UConn is back-to-back national champions, the first time that has happened since the University of Florida did it in 06-07, and they did it in dominating fashion. You go and look at every single one of their games through the NCAA tournament, they did not lose a single game by less than 14 points. Win a single game by less than 14 points. They dominated their opponents throughout the whole tournament. They played some pretty solid teams as well. What really impressed me about this team is they didn't have that one star. And I know Donovan Clingan kind of shot up there. He's projected lottery pick, but this is a weaker class. If he was in last year's class, he's not a lottery pick, so on and so forth. He's very good. But we take a look at that team, and they're deep, and it's really impressive how deep they are and how good they are, because their national championship roster from last season was decimated. They lost all 5 of their starters from last season, and they come back arguably stronger. They were by far the best team in the nation all season, and they just showed that in the tournament. There wasn't a single game where it was close. They pulled away in the second half just with how much they were able to pressure and take care of any mistake that any other team made. If a team made a turnover, they were capitalizing on it. If a team missed their shots, they were capitalizing on it. They just played great basketball throughout the tournament, and they were consistent. And in college basketball, if you are consistently great, you're one of the best college basketball teams of all time, because consistency is the hardest thing to find in college sports. So congratulations to UConn. They win their 6th national title in the last 25 years, the 6th in their program history. Like I said, 2 in a row. Are they a blue blood school now? And I'd love to pose that question to you guys here in the comments. Let me know what you think if UConn is a blue blood school. You look at your blue bloods, North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, who just lost their coach, leaving a blue blood to go to Arkansas. We talked about that yesterday. But are they a blue blood? What is your definition of a blue blood? I'll tell you mine here in a second. You take a look at a team. My definition of blue blood is a team that, first of all, you need to be winning championships, right? And you need to be winning championships. You don't have to do it consistently, but you need to constantly be in that conversation. Every single year, Duke, UNC are in this conversation. You see UNC was a 1 seed this year. Duke made it to the Elite 8. These teams are making deep runs. These teams are consistently getting top recruits, all this, all that. UConn fits into a lot of those categories, but they don't fit super smoothly. You know, they missed the tournament, I believe, 8 times in the last 25 years. Which is a good amount of times to miss if you're a blue blood. You know, when you're a blue blood school, you're kind of expecting to be locked in to March Madness every single year. And that just hasn't been the case with UConn. I do believe they are a blue blood now. Like I said, 6 national titles, 6-0 in title games. They're really, really good. They arguably have the best coach in the country, who was offered the job at Kentucky. Dan Hurley was. He did not end up taking that job, but he was offered that job. He can build it at UConn. Like I said, that depth in that game was really impressive. That was the most impressive thing to me. Their big star, Donovan Clingan, he was held to 11, 5, and 1. 11 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist. There were 4 UConn players in double figures. They picked up the slack. He was tasked with guarding Zach Edey. Zach Edey, who had an incredible game on his own. You take a look at the record books for single game points in a national championship game. He's 4th all time behind some really big names. 37 points, 37-point double-double. I know he only had 10 rebounds, but it was the first time in quite some time that Zach Edey went against a guy that wasn't giving up 5 or 6 inches on him. And it was really interesting to see. He plays smart basketball. He gets the other team into foul trouble, and that really helped keep Purdue in the game in that first half before they just started to get tired. The issue was Purdue their game plan was Zach Edey, and that was it. And UConn made the adjustments they needed to make to slow Zach Edey down. You can't stop Zach Edey in college, but they made the adjustments to slow him down. The rest of their team was able to pick up the slack. Purdue only made 1 3 all game. Purdue loses by 15 points, 75-60, but they only made 1 3-pointer. They took 7, they were 1 for 7, so they shot like 14% from 3. They average 8 3-pointers per game made. That's what they average. That right there is 21 points that they just did not have. And going into the second half, they'd only taken 2 threes. Like, this was part of their game plans. Part of their strategy was to attack the inside, wait for the double team to come. And UConn did a really good job. They didn't double team all that often. And they were just able to outcompete Zach Edey with a combination of guys, which is why I say the depth really helped. I mean, you talk about the depth for UConn. They only had 2 guys score off the bench for them. But they scored 13 points off the bench. Purdue only had 2 points off the bench all game. That's it. 2 points. It's not like a necessity to have these great bench players, but when you're playing an intense game in a national championship and you have guys playing 24 minutes and putting up no points. You have guys playing double digits minutes. 3 guys come off the bench, play double-digit minutes. You have your 8-man rotation. They score a total of 2 points. That's just not how it's going to go. UConn doesn't quite have that classic 8-man rotation. They kind of do, but it's more of like a 6+ kind of rotation. Their starters all played 30+ minutes this game. It's a very interesting way that UConn plays basketball, but they were still able to outscore them depth-wise. They play fast, physical basketball, and it's tough for these teams to deal with. They just kind of grind down the opponent. It's what they did all year, all tournament, and it led to a national championship. So, congratulations to UConn. I think there were conversations last year over whether they should be blue blood school, they should be considered a blue blood or not. I think they absolutely should be. I'm really curious to hear if you guys have thoughts on this, because I think that is kind of the big takeaway, I guess, from this March Madness. A March Madness that, if we're going to take a step back and look at it, was kind of a boring March Madness. There wasn't too much intrigue. You had that NC State run, but outside of that, everything was kind of chalk. There weren't too many upsets, which is fine. There's going to be years like that. There always are. But we take a look around, and I think that was perfect. I think this was the perfect storm for women's basketball to explode. And I think this is great for the future of the game. March Madness will return to the way it is a lot of the time with craziness and whatever else is going on. But UConn wins their national championship. They were by far the best team in the nation. So it's not really that huge of a shocker, but it's just the way that UConn plays that I was so impressed by. The endurance for them to have. Like I said, their starters played 30 plus minutes, all five of them. You basically had one guy come off the bench. You had a couple guys go 4 and 5 minutes, but you only had one guy come off the bench really and play more than 10 minutes, a significant chunk of minutes. And they did a really, really good job. They did a really good job containing Zach Edey as much as you can. It's weird to say they did a good job containing Zach Edey when he goes for 37 and 10. But if you were watching that game, where Zach Edey kind of feasts a lot is on the offensive glass. And with their size, what Clingan did really, really well. I know he only had 5 rebounds, but he got in the way. He boxed out, got in the way, let the rest of his team get rebounds, get those tips. They were really aggressive on the glass. You had 14 offensive rebounds. You out-rebound Purdue, who generally out-rebounds the other team because they have Zach Edey. You out-rebound them by 7. Get those second chance points up. It's huge. UConn had a great game. Like I said, 4 players in double figures. My big question, my big takeaway, other than UConn officially cementing themselves as blue blood status school, is how high is Zach Edey going to go in the draft? And this is a question that I think people have really started to pay attention to. The draft isn't until June, the end of June, so there's plenty of time for teams to evaluate and stuff. But a 7'5" guy like Zach Edey, his size by itself makes you intrigued. And we've seen tall guys with nothing else not be successful in the NBA. You think of Taco Fall pretty recently. He's over there in China now, I believe. He's not in the NBA. He's dominating outside the NBA just because he's so big. But he wasn't mobile. He wasn't able to do these things. You sit there and you watch Zach Edey. He's more than just 7'5". He's making these tough hook shots. They're not layups. He's not shooting threes. He has the ability to shoot threes. He doesn't do it that often because that's just not his job. His job is to camp down low and be that big space eater, dominate in the post. And that's what he's good at, but he has the ability to shoot a 3 or 2. We've seen his footwork has drastically improved. His finishing has drastically improved as well. Really, this season from last season for Zach Edey was night and day. And I think he absolutely deserves to go in the first round now. If you asked me last season, I wouldn't be so sure. But I've seen mocks of him going as high as 14. It's a good spot. Again, this is a really weak draft class, so I think he could be a potential lottery pick depending on what teams see out of him, what they expect he can develop into. Because Zach Edey is a guy that if he just never develops, isn't going to be that special of an NBA player. But he has shown the ability to develop a little bit, and I'd love to see what NBA teams think of him. I think he can be a very special player up at the next level. Again, size helps. But you're seeing nowadays 7'5" guys come more than once a generation. Obviously have Wemby. He's a whole different animal. We just mentioned Taco Fall. He's up there, 7 feet. Donovan Clingan is 7'2". There's all these huge 7-footers. Chet Holmgren in the NBA right now. All these guys. It's really, really cool to see these tall guys go to work against each other. And I'm curious to see how high he goes in the draft. I think he should be a first-round pick. Maybe even a lottery pick. Like I said, it's a weak draft class, so I think he'll go pretty high. But again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think of Zach Edey in the draft. Is UConn a blue blood school? Let me know what you think. Why or why not? In our next segment coming up, we are going to transition into the NBA. We're going to talk a little bit about the Defensive Player of the Year race between Rudy Gobert and Victor Wembenyama. Stick around for that. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.